A ruthless faction of cybernetic warlords, each one a fusion of flesh and machine, their bodies wired directly into their battle cruisers. Their technology was ancient, unstoppable, forged in the blackest depths of space. Kael swallowed hard as he scanned the enemy fleet. There were hundreds of them. Aelia stood beside him, her violet eyes reflecting the glow of the command screens. "This is it," she said softly. "Your first real battle." Kael exhaled. "No respawns, huh?" Commander Zyros smirked, his arms crossed. "Not in this universe." Before Kael could respond, a new alert blared through the ship. "Warning, Voidborn forces locked on, attack imminent." The battlefield was about to ignite. Kael's exosuit synced to the warship's tactical interface, feeding him a real-time analysis of the incoming onslaught. His HUD lit up with targeting vectors, enemy weak points, and possible engagement strategies. This wasn't a game. This was war. Aelia gripped his shoulder. "You're ready for this, Kael. You just have to trust yourself." Kael's heart pounded, but he forced a grin. "Guess it's time to test out what this suit can really do." Zyros turned to his crew. "Launch the strike team. And get the human on the front line." A countdown appeared in Kael's HUD. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The hangar doors exploded open, revealing the vastness of space. Kael launched himself into the void. The warzone awaited. The Void-born armada didn't hesitate. From the darkness, their cannons roared to life, unleashing a storm of plasma lances and ion disruptors. Streaks of energy ripped through the void, slamming into the Celestial Vanguard's shields. The entire warship trembled under the relentless assault. Warning alert, shields at 65% and dropping fast. Kael gritted his teeth as red warning lights flashed across the command deck. They had to hit back, now. "We need to counterattack before they overwhelm us," he shouted. Commander Zyros barely hesitated. "Then take command of the X-99 Interceptor Squadron." Kael's breath caught in his throat. "Me?" Aelia turned to him, her violet eyes filled with certainty. "You already proved yourself in the tournament. Now prove yourself here." His heart pounded. This was different. In the arena, he had been one warrior against an opponent. Now, he was about to lead an entire squadron into battle. Zyros tapped a control panel, and the tactical interface flickered in Kael's vision. Neural link activated. Data synchronized. Suddenly, Kael was no longer just standing on the command deck. He was inside the cockpit. His mind merged with the X-99 Interceptor, a sleek, high-speed starfighter built for advanced aerial combat. His HUD displayed a real-time holographic battlefield, and through his neural uplink, he felt the presence of 12 other pilots, their minds linked, waiting for his command. The familiar rush of a game interface filled his senses. But this wasn't a game. The Void-born ships loomed ahead, their spiked hulls gleaming with pulsating red energy. Kael tightened his grip on the flight controls, feeling the thrusters surge to life beneath him. His voice was steady. "All right, squadron. Let's light these guys up." The battle had begun. Kael's X-99 Interceptor rocketed forward, cutting through the darkness of space like a meteor. Behind him, 12 starfighters followed, weaving between streaks of plasma fire. The Void-born armada met them head-on. Their ships, jagged, angular predators of war, moved in ruthless formation, unleashing a storm of ion bolts and laser blasts. Kael's MindSync interface fed him real-time data. The RTX 5090's quantum AI processed enemy movements faster than any pilot could react. He wasn't just flying, he was predicting the battlefield. A Void-born fighter locked onto him. His HUD blared. "Warning, incoming missile." Kael barely flinched. His instincts kicked in. He yanked the controls hard left, forcing his ship into a spiraling barrel roll. The missile grazed past his wing, exploding into the void. Aelia's voice crackled through his comms. "You're flying like a veteran." Kael smirked, juking through another wave of enemy fire. "Guess I had a good teacher." The battle raged on. Kael's squadron fought with relentless precision, but the Voidborn weren't backing down. And then, a massive shadow loomed over the battlefield. A Voidborn dreadnought emerged from the abyss, its spiked hull bristling with cannons. Its core weapon, an apocalyptic plasma cannon, began charging. Kael's stomach dropped. His HUD displayed the energy output. One shot. Enough power to obliterate an entire moon. His hands tightened on the controls. Guys? We might have a problem. Zyro's voice came through, calm but firm. Then fix it. Kael exhaled sharply. His mind raced through a dozen strategies. Every tactic he had ever used in a game, every maneuver he had ever practiced. None of them were enough. He needed to think bigger. Kael's eyes locked onto the dreadnought's weak points, energy nodes glowing along its spine. His fingers twitched over the controls. A crazy plan formed in his mind. Alia's voice was soft, but knowing. Kael, what are you thinking? He grinned. Something stupid. His thrusters ignited. Kael's X-99 shot forward, straight at the dreadnought. Game on. The battlefield was chaos. Kael's X-99 interceptor twisted and spun through the void, narrowly dodging a storm of plasma fire. His squadron followed close behind, engaging in a brutal dance of life and death. The Voidborn fighters were fast, too fast. Their sleek, obsidian hulls cut through space like predators, their weapons unleashing relentless bursts of high-energy projectiles. But Kael was faster. His neural interface linked directly to the RTX 5090's quantum AI, calculating enemy trajectories in real time. He wasn't just reacting, he was anticipating. A red warning flashed on his HUD. Warning incoming missile lock. Kael yanked the controls, rolling his ship into a tight corkscrew. The missile screamed past his wing, detonating behind him in a flash of blue fire. Ilya's voice came through his comms. You're flying like a veteran. Kael smirked, juking left to avoid another attack. Guess I had a good teacher. But then, a shadow loomed over the battlefield. The Voidborn dreadnought entered the fray, its colossal frame blotting out the starlight. Its spiked armor pulsed with crimson energy, and its main cannon, a supercharged plasma devastator, began charging. Kael's stomach clenched. His HUD calculated the energy output. One shot. Enough to vaporize an entire moon. A single hit, and the Celestial Vanguard's flagship would be reduced to floating wreckage. Kael's fingers clenched around the controls. Guys? We might have a problem. Zyro's voice was sharp. Then fix it. Kael exhaled. His mind raced through possibilities. The dreadnought was heavily shielded. Conventional attacks wouldn't work. But Kael's gamer instincts saw something others didn't. Weak points. Along the dreadnought's spine, small glowing energy nodes pulsed in rhythm with the charging cannon. If he could take them out. Ilya's voice was softer now, almost knowing. Kael, what are you thinking? He grinned. Something crazy. His thrusters flared. The X-99 shot forward, straight toward the dreadnought. His squadron's voices filled the comms. Commander Kael, what are you doing? Kael's voice was steady. Breaking the rules. Game on. Kael's hands were steady, but his heart pounded like a war drum. This was it. The Voidborn dreadnought loomed ahead, its main cannon still charging, a swirling vortex of energy strong enough to erase the Celestial Vanguard's flagship from existence. He had seconds to act. Kael's RTX 5090 neural uplink pulsed with raw data, his mind processing battle strategies faster than any human should. The AI's quantum prediction system mapped out thousands of possible outcomes, but only one led to survival. He took it. His X-99 interceptor accelerated, breaking formation and diving straight toward the dreadnought. Enemy turrets locked onto him instantly, red warning symbols flashing across his HUD. Missile locks. Plasma arrays charging. No way out. Ilya's voice cracked through the comms, panicked. Kael! What are you doing? He grinned. Something impossible. In a move that defied logic, Kael engaged his hacking protocols mid-flight. The RTX 5090's AI-enhanced processing infiltrated the Dreadnought's targeting systems in real time. Enemy weapons flickered. Void-born gunners hesitated as their interface screens glitched, their targeting reticles suddenly shifting away from Kael and locking onto each other. The Dreadnought's main cannon overloaded, its energy buildup collapsing in on itself. Sparks and fire erupted across its hull as its own fleet scrambled in confusion and chaos. Aelia gasped. "Kael, you just hijacked a void-born battleship, with a graphics card." Kael smirked, banking his fighter away as the void-born fleet spiraled into disarray. "I prefer tactical genius." Seizing the moment, the Celestial Vanguard launched a full-force counterattack. Zyro's warships unleashed a barrage of precise laser fire, ripping through the fractured enemy ranks. Void-born fighters exploded, dreadnought shields collapsed, and within moments, the once dominant invaders were in full retreat. The battle was over. For now. Kael exhaled, slumping back in his pilot's seat as the adrenaline finally caught up with him. Zyro's voice crackled through the comms. "Not bad, rookie." Aelia's face appeared on his HUD, her violet eyes glowing with pride. "Told you he was special." Kael laughed breathlessly, running a hand through his sweat-drenched hair. "All right. So, when do I get my next upgrade?" Kael shifted uncomfortably under the weight of 100 piercing gazes. The Council of Elders, beings of unfathomable knowledge, sat in floating thrones, their ethereal forms pulsing with ancient energy. Some resembled humanoid figures, others were masses of shifting cosmic mist, their very presence distorting reality around them. The chamber itself was like something out of a dream, suspended above the gas giant of S Prime, encased within a massive crystalline ring that shimmered with memories of the past. Holographic records of long-forgotten wars, fallen empires, and intergalactic betrayals flickered along the walls. At the center of it all stood High Chancellor Orivax, a being composed of pure radiant energy. His voice reverberated through the chamber, powerful yet unreadable. "You are Kael Drayan." Kael straightened, trying to mask the unease creeping through his bones. Yeah? That's me." The Chancellor's form flickered, his presence pressing against Kael like an invisible force. "The one who turned the tide of battle." Kael glanced at Aelia, who stood at his side, her violet eyes filled with silent concern. He forced a casual shrug. "I mean, I had help." Orivax ignored him. "And the one who wields technology beyond its time." That made Kael pause. His hand instinctively brushed against his gauntlet, where the RTX 5090's AI core pulsed faintly beneath the surface. The air in the chamber grew heavier. A murmur of unease rippled through the other council members. Aelia's fingers found his wrist, her grip tightening. Kael frowned. "Okay, what's with all the mystery? If you guys want an RTX 5090, just say so." The chamber dimmed. The Chancellor raised a hand, and a holographic projection materialized before Kael. A swirling rift, an unnatural tear in spacetime, hovered at the center of the display. Its edges flickered with chaotic energy, twisting and warping the surrounding space like a wound in reality itself. Kael's breath caught in his throat. Orivax's voice dropped to a grave tone. "That card should not exist in this universe." A heavy silence filled the room. Kael blinked. "Come again?" The projection zoomed in, showing data streams and dimensional readings that made no sense to him. The Chancellor continued. "This technology was not created here. It came from another timeline, another dimension." Kael's stomach twisted. He turned to Aelia. She looked just as stunned as he felt. Another timeline? Kael tried to process the implications. Had he been using technology from an alternate universe this entire time? Orivax's form flickered, his voice layered with something deeper, something uneasy. "Something, or someone, sent it to you." Kael felt the blood drain from his face. His mysterious GPU. His sudden gaming skills. His ability to outmatch even the most advanced AI. None of it had been just luck. Someone had orchestrated this. But who? And more importantly, why? The victory celebration aboard the Celestial Vanguard was unlike anything Kael had ever experienced. The ship's grand chamber had been transformed into a spectacle of light and sound. Holograms of celestial beings spun through the air in synchronized dances, nebula-colored drinks shimmered in elegant glass orbs, and the rhythmic pulse of interstellar music reverberated through the walls. Alien warriors, engineers, and strategists mingled, their voices mixing into an electric hum of excitement. Kael stood near the edge of the balcony, staring out through the panoramic window. The aftermath of the battle still lingered. Wreckage from the void-born fleet floated in the distance, illuminated by the faint glow of a dying star. He had won. But the weight of what that meant still hadn't sunk in. Aelia joined him, her silver-blue skin glowing under the soft neon ambience. She held a drink that flickered between colors, shifting with her touch. "You're a hero now, Kael." Kael let out a dry chuckle. "I just hacked a spaceship with a gaming GPU. And saved an entire fleet in the process." Kael turned to see Zyros, arms crossed, his sharp gaze unreadable. The Celestial Vanguard's commander rarely handed out compliments. Kael shrugged. "Guess that means I get a VIP pass to the next tournament?" Zyros didn't laugh. Instead, he reached into his combat vest and pulled out a small holographic device, pressing a button. A golden spiral flickered to life above it, surrounded by orbiting stars. The symbol of the Galactic Council. Kael's smirk faded. "The what now?" Aelia's expression darkened. "The Council governs all advanced civilizations in the known galaxy. If they're interested in you, it means something bigger is coming." Kael sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Why does that sound like bad news?" Zyros extended the holographic invitation toward him. The message pulsed in an unreadable alien script, then translated itself in real time. Kael read the first line aloud. "Kael Drayan. You are summoned." Aelia exhaled. "They don't invite people, Kael. They summon them." The room around them suddenly felt colder. Kael stared at the glowing message, his grip tightening. He had fought a battle. Won a war. But this? This felt like something much, much bigger. Kael barely had time to process the Council's warning before the entire chamber trembled. A low, unnatural hum vibrated through the crystalline walls, followed by a sudden, violent shockwave. The chamber's luminous architecture, normally serene and unshakable, cracked like fragile ice. A howling wind of pure energy swept through the vast hall, carrying with it eerie whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The councilors' forms flickered, their energy signatures destabilizing. Alarm sirens blared in tones Kael had never heard before, warning signals not meant for mere intruders. On the central holo platform, the swirling rift hologram, the one that had revealed Kael's mysterious technology, began to pulse. Its glow intensified until the display overloaded, sparking out of existence. Then, the impossible happened. The rift opened. A jagged, gaping tear in reality ripped into existence, splitting the air like a wound in space-time itself. The edges of the rift shimmered with an unstable purple-black energy, bending the very fabric of the universe around it. And from within, they emerged. Figures stepped out of the abyss, dark silhouettes wrapped in sleek, cybernetic armor, their movements unnervingly precise. Their eyes glowed like dying stars, cold and merciless. Aelia gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Voidborn. But Kael could tell immediately, these weren't the same warriors they had fought before. Their armor was more refined, more advanced, etched with intricate patterns that pulsed with unstable quantum energy. Their weapons, unlike the brutal designs of the void-born soldiers he had encountered in battle, radiated a dangerous, shifting glow, as if they were phasing between dimensions. Then, one of them stepped forward. Taller than the rest, its body encased in a sleek, obsidian-black exosuit, lines of neon red tracing the contours of its form. But it wasn't the design that made Kael's breath hitch. It was the insignia carved into its chest plate. RTX. The figure's voice shattered the silence, deep, mechanical, and echoing with an unnatural multidimensional distortion. The experiment is over. The chamber seemed to shrink around Kael. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. The figure extended a clawed, metal hand toward him. Return the hardware. Kael's breath came in short, sharp gasps. The RTX 5090. That was what they wanted. It wasn't just some overpowered GPU. It wasn't just a tool that let him bend the laws of combat. It was theirs. Kael's fingers twitched toward his hollow gauntlet, instinct kicking in. He took a step back, every fiber of his being screaming at him to run. But instead, he smirked. No thanks. He flexed his fingers. I kinda like my GPU. The figure tilted its head, processing his defiance. Then, without warning, it raised a hand. A sudden gravitational force gripped the chamber. Kael felt his bones strain under the pressure. The very fabric of reality distorted, bending inward, as if the universe itself was being rewritten. Aelia reached for him, her eyes wide with terror. The Celestial Council flickered, their energy destabilizing further. And Kael realized, this wasn't just an invasion. It was a full-scale reality collapse. The fight for the universe had just begun. The gravitational wave hit Kael like a runaway starship, sending him skidding across the fractured crystal floor. His exosuit struggled to recalibrate, red warning glyphs flashing across his HUD. Every molecule in his body screamed under the sudden pressure, as if reality itself was trying to crush him. The chamber around them twisted, its shimmering architecture warping like melted glass. Holographic records of history glitched and fragmented, replaying moments from across time, ancient wars, forgotten alliances, civilizations rising and crumbling in an instant. At the heart of the chaos stood the Void-born commander, its obsidian armor pulsing with unnatural power. It tilted its head slightly, as if amused by Kael's resistance. Then, with a single swipe of its hand, the entire chamber collapsed inward, pulling everything toward it in a miniature singularity. Aelia reacted first. Her plasma daggers ignited, twin streaks of crackling light illuminating her fierce expression. With a burst of speed, she launched herself at the commander, spinning through the air like a dancer of death. Light met darkness. Their weapons clashed, sending shockwaves rippling through the chamber. The Voidborn's blade, forged from shifting void energy, absorbed the glow of Aelia's daggers, eating the light itself. Zyros roared, his grav hammer crackling with antimatter energy as he charged. He brought it down in a devastating arc, aiming to shatter the enemy's core, but the commander simply raised a hand. A pulse of void energy exploded outward, stopping Zyros mid-air. The hammer froze inches from its target, trapped in the pull of an unseen force. Zyros' eyes widened. What? Then the force threw him across the chamber, slamming him into the crystalline walls. The council guards opened fire, streams of high-energy plasma bolts raining down on the intruders, but the void devoured them mid-air. The energy twisted, siphoned into nothingness before even reaching its target. Kael gritted his teeth, dragging himself back to his feet. His fingers scrambled for his hollow gauntlet, activating the interface. The RTX 5090 pulsed. Not just with energy, but with something deeper. Something alive. Kael's vision blurred. For a fraction of a second, the world around him fractured, splitting into infinite versions of itself. Timelines unraveled before his eyes. He could see every possible move before it happened. Every attack, every dodge, every counterstrike, playing out in his mind like a game with all cheat codes enabled. The RTX 5090 wasn't just a machine. It was a weapon of infinite potential. A presence flickered through his neural link, a voice not quite human, not quite machine. Processing. Initializing multi-reality combat mode. Kael's heartbeat slowed. His hands steadied. He saw it. Aelia's next move? The commander's reaction. The weak point in its armor. A fraction of a second where the void energy would falter. The battle wasn't chaos anymore. It was data. Kael smirked. Alright, let's see what this thing can really do. He moved. And the tide of the battle shifted. The void-born commander advanced, each step distorting the very fabric of space. Shadows slithered around its form like living tendrils, shifting and breaking apart before reforming into something even more unnatural. Its voice didn't echo, It reverberated across dimensions, as if layered over itself in countless alternate realities. You are an anomaly. This technology does not belong to you. Kael smirked, his pulse steady despite the overwhelming presence before him. Then why does it fit me so perfectly? His hollow gauntlet pulsed, the RTX 5090's energy surging through his body. The device shifted, its light bending into something entirely new, a high-density reality disruptor. He didn't know how he knew that. But it felt right. The Voidborn attacked, warping space with a pulse of antimatter energy so dense it swallowed the surrounding light. But Kael had already seen it happen. A fraction of a second before the strike, the timelines split inside his mind. He dodged at the exact moment the attack should have vaporized him, rolling aside in one smooth motion. His new weapon flared to life, a pulse of disruptive energy surging forward. The blast ripped through the Voidborn's armor, warping its metallic exoskeleton and sending it staggering back. Its form flickered, like a corrupted digital file trying to re-render itself in real time. Aelia landed beside Kael, breathing heavily. Her daggers still hummed with plasma energy, but her eyes were locked onto him. What just happened? She asked, her voice both awed and wary. Kael flexed his fingers, feeling the raw power coursing through him. He grinned. I think I just overclocked reality. A sound ripped through the chamber, not just a screech, but a distortion in the very fabric of existence. The Voidborn warriors lurched in unison, their individual forms melting together, merging into a single, towering entity. A convergence of shadows and metal, their glowing eyes coalescing into one singular, blindingly bright core. Zyros cursed, gripping his grav hammer tighter. Oh, that's new! The Council's High Chancellor, an entity of pure energy that had existed for millennia, actually took a step back. They are rewriting their own existence, adapting. The Voidborn fusion pulsed, the space around it bending and distorting. Its presence glitched, flickering between timelines, becoming something beyond physical form. Kael's jaw clenched. He could feel it. This wasn't just an enemy. It was a program rewriting itself in real time. A system updating, evolving, learning how to counter him. Kael's hands tightened into fists. His RTX 5090 pulsed once more, its energy syncing with his thoughts, feeding him possibilities, calculations, probabilities. If the Voidborn were coding themselves into something stronger, then Kael was going to crash their system. His eyes burned with determination. So let's break the code. The final battle erupted in a storm of chaos and collapsing reality. The council chambers shattered as the Voidborn merged, their forms folding into one colossal entity of pulsing quantum energy. Rifts ripped open in space-time, each one showing fragments of different realities, some where Kael had already fallen, some where the Voidborn had won. Some where the universe had simply ceased to exist. Kael's mind raced. The RTX 5090 pulsed, flooding him with raw data. Timelines fractured and reassembled in his vision, forming infinite branches of possible futures. For the first time, Kael wasn't just reacting. He was seeing beyond time itself. And then, he saw it. The one move that could change everything. He turned to Aelia, his heart hammering. His fate, her fate, the fate of reality itself, all balanced on what happened next. I need you to trust me, he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging around them. She didn't even hesitate. Always. Kael exhaled then activated the RTX 5090. No more limits. No more restrictions. He pushed the card beyond anything it was ever designed to do, channeling its power into a single command. Rewrite reality. The universe shuddered. Time fractured. For a brief second, Kael became every version of himself across infinite timelines. The perfect strategist who had mastered every war. The ultimate warrior who had won every battle. The master hacker who could bend code, and reality, to his will. Every version of Kael merged into one. He was infinite. And in that moment, he rewrote the code of the Voidborn. The massive entity froze, its form flickering between existence and erasure. The shadows cracked, unraveling like corrupted data. A distorted scream echoed through the collapsing void, and then silence. The rift sealed itself. The void-born were gone. As the dust settled, the silence felt deafening. Kael could feel it. Something inside him had shifted, like the universe itself had taken a deep breath after holding it for too long. His hollow gauntlet dimmed, the RTX 5090 flickering weakly, its once limitless energy nearly spent. The immense power that had made him more than human, that had let him overclock reality itself, was fading. His knees buckled. Aelia caught him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders before he could collapse. "Kael!" Her voice was urgent, worried. "Are you?" He forced a grin, his breath coming in short gasps. "I think," he exhaled, glancing at the dying glow of his gauntlet. "I just patched reality." A beat of silence. Then, Zyros barked out a laugh. "I have no idea what just happened, but that was the greatest battle I've ever seen." He clapped Kael on the back, nearly knocking him over. Around them, the council members, beings of energy, wisdom, and ancient power, stood in stunned reverence. The High Chancellor, though still a shifting form of light and shadow, bowed his head. "You have done the impossible." His voice hummed like a celestial choir. "The balance is restored." Kael looked down at his gauntlet. The RTX 5090, the most advanced piece of technology in any known universe, the device that had turned him from a gamer into a legend, was now silent. Its power was gone. Aelia placed a gentle hand on his. Her touch was warm, grounding him back to the present. "Maybe it's better this way," she murmured. "No more wars. No more rifts." Kael smirked. "Yeah, but I was just getting good at it." She laughed, shaking her head before pulling him into a tight embrace. For the first time in a long while, Kael felt free. As they stood together, beneath the endless stars, a realization settled over him. Maybe the greatest power in the universe wasn't technology. It was love,